name is Moritz Spangenberg. I'm a client partner at Netguru. I have the pleasure today to talk to you around banking innovation during our Disruption Forum of Innovation Labs. If you've watched our previous panels, you may have seen that we have already touched some general angles on innovation already. Today, now we want to get more specific, and we want to talk about the challenges and opportunities of innovation in a specific industry, which is financial services, banking to be more precise. So that means we will talk about the culture of innovation, and if that is a crucial element for being successful in innovation in that space. And we'll also hear about how to design organizational structures for innovation in financial services and what role communication possibly also plays in that. And we'll also talk with our panelists about winning strategies in banking innovation. And of course, we'll leave some room for questions in the Q&A. So my request to the audience would be, if you have questions, comments, please feel free to type them as we speak. Either we'll try to incorporate them during our discussion or during our time that we will save after our last topics during the event. So to cover those mentioned topics, we've called upon some highly interesting innovators from the industry. Two of them will be speaking from London, I believe, today, and one of them from Amsterdam. So it will be HSBC, Rabobank, and the Deutsche Bank. Speaking of Deutsche Bank, let me introduce you to our first speaker, which is Nataly Nieves Reyes. Nataly knows the Deutsche Bank quite well since she's worked already in the CEO resort, worked in different strategy analysis department, as well as in the deposits and payments department, and is now an innovation specialist at the innovation labs of the renowned Deutsche Bank. Nataly, sitting in London currently, I believe, says our innovation strategy is driven by clients' demands together with the overall bank's priorities. Welcome, Nataly.
Hi, Moritz. Thank you for the invitation and for having me.
Thank you, Nataly, for being with us. Our next speaker, which I would like to call upon our panel, is Maarten Boelens. Maarten has over 13 years of experience working in management consulting, strategy roles, also heading and working as a global markets executive director at the National Bank of Abu Dhabi, also heading the product management there. Now he's working as a senior strategy and innovation manager at Rabobank, which is a Dutch multinational banking and financial services company headquartered in Netherlands. I believe you were speaking from Amsterdam today with us, Maarten. And some facts, if you don't know it, Rabobank is a global leader in food and agriculture banking and sustainability-oriented banking, which I also did not know before. Maarten says the innovation strategy of him is driven by helping his SME customers grow. Welcome, Maarten.
Thank you very much for the invite. It's a really pleasure to be here.
Thank you. It's our pleasure, Maarten. Let me call upon our next speaker, which is Steve Suarez. Steve has over 25 years of experience in utilizing his background in multiple organization roles in international markets, working on corporate strategies and priorities. And I've just seen that Steve has been to my home country, which is Germany, as well, during his time in the military in Frankfurt. However, he does work at HSBC for almost 17 years now and holds a position as the global head of innovation for finance and risks. Also some facts for HSBC. By 2020, HSBC is now the 6th largest bank in the world and the largest one in Europe. Steve says his innovation strategy is guided by harnessing the power of the crowd. Welcome, Steve.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. Happy to be here.
Hello, Steve. Pleasure to have you. Steve, let me directly throw a question of you and to start to talk with you guys a little bit around the role of culture of innovation, if there is a role, and if that is an important and crucial element in your innovation strategy, successes, and endeavors. So, Steve, from our pre-talks, I've understood that you're now tasked to infuse innovation into workforce of around 14,000 people at HSBC. So that's a large, heavy responsibility. What role does culture and mindset play in your view to succeed in such an assignment?
I really put a lot of worth around mindset and culture, but mostly on mindset, because for you to do innovation, it does require you to think a bit different. So a lot of the people that I work with are excellent professionals in risk management and financial management. But if you think about innovation and what needs to happen, it is kind of a different thing. So in risk management, you want to eliminate failure. In innovation, you actually want to promote failure. You want to learn fast and kind of learn from your failures.
Yeah.
You want to control the outcome. In innovation, you want as much variability that you can get so that you can pick different options and kind of work through it. It was a very inwardly focused versus a more customer focused mentality. So there is room for both, and you got to know when to go through it. But it does kind of make it hard for people that normally don't feel comfortable with saying, oh, we're failing. And if you're not failing enough, or you're not failing, you're actually not being innovative. A lot of people say, oh yeah, we did all these POCs and they all succeeded. Well, that's not innovation. You're just doing what you already know to do. And so for you to bring new things to your department, for you to bring new things to the world, you have to challenge yourself and you have to be out there. And I can tell you for some people, it's a very uncomfortable situation to kind of be out there in the unknown kind of by yourself and working through it. And that's why the mindset is such a key thing, because you need to get people to not only embrace the mindset, but to be comfortable with that.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I can very well imagine if you're working in risk, that's very, very difficult for you to take a lot of risk in order to be successful, right? And yeah, we also want to talk about this later on topics on how do you make people fail if you really only want to win it. You just said, Steve. Let me ask you, Nataly, would you agree? Do you also think that managing innovation successfully is more difficult in specific industries, such in financial services?
I wouldn't probably say it's more difficult, but I think that what I can say for sure from my experience is that it is completely different to managing innovation in any other type of industries and verticals. So I feel like when we talk about innovation, there are a lot of common approaches that people are being told to follow, books that people are being told to read, like the Lean Startup, follow this methodology and be agile. And I feel like a lot of that works. But when looking at financial industries, we need to consider that we are working within a very regulated environment. And I think that also our culture brings a history of failures that banks have passed through for quite some time. And I think that's also one of the reasons for us being as the way that we do. And for banks having such an enhanced control function in the way that we work. So I think that those are really key elements to consider when thinking about innovation. And I think also because of the nature of the products that we have, our products really within banks or financial institutions are really our services or our data-driven products. So many of the approaches that you would normally take in innovation of launching a product into the market, see what the customer feedback is, and then pivot, fail, and then launch it again, doesn't work as straightforward, I would say, as in other industries. Mainly, as I say, I think because of the nature of what we do, the type of business that we offer, and the environment really where we work.
Mm-hmm. Cool, interesting. I would also like to ask Maarten. I know from our pre-talks that we had some discussions on what elements can basically transport it. Is really the cultural element something very much specific in financial services that gives you a very hard time to innovate, or not? Would love to hear more about that, Maarten. What do you think? Would you agree that culture is a very much specific challenging element in that?
I think what sets the banking industry apart from other industries is exactly what Nataly said. It is a highly regulated environment.
Yeah.
Therefore, we're very used to having a lot of checks and balances, and that ultimately becomes also part of of the mindset. And I think innovation is then somewhere you have to find a sort of a balance between what risk can we take and how can we improve, let's say, the most optimal customer journey. And that's always that's the balance that we're looking for.
Yeah, agreed. I guess it's also from our pre-talks, the very much regulated environment does impose some special specialties to the whole innovation funnel, to the different horizons. If we look at making innovation happen, right, and if we do see headlines like the robots are coming, which I believe have been around for the last couple of years, coming with robotic process automation, coming with AI and machine learning. Steve, when you hear those things, or when your workforce is basically reading those things, do you think there are fears coming up there, and how do you deal with those possible fears coming out of the robots are overtaking my job, possibly?
Yeah, I think that, some of it is fears, and we have to work and see how it does operate. But there are certain things that machines do much better than humans. And so I think it's a combination of how we augment what humans are doing and what machines are doing to find better solutions. So I'll give you an example. We have a data scientist. We hire data scientists from universities to come and work with us. Now, if you look at what they're doing or how they're spending their time doing data wrangling and data cleansing. And then they spend part of their time doing the insight and kind of that high level, what we actually brought them in to do. And so if we can take that part of the mundane work out of them so that we can use them for what they went to university for all these years to do, I think that will be more powerful. So I think if we can use machines to take out stuff that doesn't add a lot of value and things that have to happen, and I think that there's an opportunity there. And there's always going to be technologies, and there's always going to be machines that are going to make things better. We just need to be adaptive, understand it, and then see what we'll do. And that's why there's a lot of industries throughout world history that innovation has disrupted their jobs. But we humans are very adaptable, and we find new ways of things to do. And there are more jobs now than there ever been in the lifetime of human existence. So I'm not worried that we will have jobs. We will. It's just a matter of what is it that we're going to be doing. And I love the idea of having machines do the stuff that we don't really need to be doing and that they can do better for us.
The role of jobs will be changing. Yes, I would totally agree. And thanks for bridging actually to my next question I was reserving for you, Steve. So if you think about teaching innovation, and you've said earlier, right? So if you're working in risk, those people are used to take calculated risk and less risk. How do you teach them to basically fail if they're usually used to win in their part of the game?
I think you have to create the environment for it, right? So it's not like we're saying people can get risk and do things in production or anything to impact anything. What we do is about customer trust and doing the best thing for our customers. We do our experiments in sandboxes and we try things out there. So at no point will we ever risk anything to where it would impact anybody. But that's kind of the environment we give people to bring in their data, try out their experiments and see if it works, to see if we can kind of do something better. So I think it is risky, but it's a kind of a protective bunker, if you will, that you kind of limit the amount of work that can be done. So that's the important part. Only then, when we validate that something works and we say, this is fantastic, we want to scale it and we want to roll it out, that's when we kind of go out and ensure that we have all of the protection, all the regulations that my colleagues have to deal with to go out there. We don't want to kill ideas too early in the stage, because I can tell you, I can give you a full list of why something won't work, and then we'll never do anything out. But we do, it is a risk and take, and we have to work that out.
Yeah. Having success is accepting failure. I would totally agree. I was wondering, Nataly, how does the Deutsche Bank, the Innovation Lab, and we've talked a little bit about, and maybe later we've also some time to talk about the specific roles there that you have. They are all also designed on the purpose that you want to fulfill. But how do you really handle to make it okay to fail in the organization, or how to make failure part of the innovative culture?
Yeah, I think it really also comes down to how you define failure, because I feel like obviously in general terms failure has a negative resonance, when in reality, for everyone that works in innovation, failure is just part of your day job, really. And I feel like this is also the type of mindset and culture that we are trying to expand in the organization. So I think that for us, when we consider the different scenarios, when we have an idea and we say, okay, let's turn this idea actually into a business opportunity or into a product, the scenarios that we evaluate is what is the risk of doing something and failing, doing something and succeeding, or not doing anything. I think that's like our kind of question number one, which is why we always take the other road of saying, well, actually, we will go ahead and we will just try out and see what happens. And if it doesn't work out, we will have learned something out of it. So I think that from the different approaches that we have learned is also, as Steve mentioned, we do things in a kind of phased approach. So we started small before we scale, so that if phase one fails, well, we may change the strategy or we may change the way that we do things before getting to the next level. So that I think that we have learned throughout the years what are really the risks or the roots of those failures and the risks, and how can we avoid that in the future. But really, as long as you learn something out of those failures, I think that is something really well embraced and accepted and normal within an innovation function.
So I understood that what you guys are saying is it's very important when we are on top of the innovation fund to create maybe a sandbox, as Steven said, like environment, a safe environment where it is okay to fail, which is protected, where the negative impact also is, let's say, limited, right? And maybe not necessarily affecting the core business of anything. Cool.
Could I add a comment on that?
Please, of course, Maarten.
So we very much have the philosophy that the experiments we run, the outcome cannot be predicted. So we run experiments and validate the things that we believe. And ultimately, we believe that winning is about having the fastest cycle times and learning and getting the learnings out of your experiments, and then being able to distribute these learnings throughout the organization. And so in short, that is where what we try to measure ourselves on. And if things don't validate, the people who work on experiments, they also know that their job does not depend on it. Their job is to run experiments and not specifically tied to a specific project. I think that helps.
Yeah, totally.
Can I add to Maarten's point? Sorry, Maarten, I think you made an excellent point. And I can tell, this is what I tell everybody, the secret to innovation is exactly what you said. If we can make the cycle time frictionless, as less expensive as possible, and people can do their learnings as fast as possible, that's the trick. That's the secret to innovation. If you take one thing away, it's that.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Makes a failure cheap and fast, right? Yeah, good takeaway. And I think that also answers the question that Radek mentioned from the audience: are big banks internally really okay with failing? Well, I guess if failing is very fast, then it is more okay and the more digestible, and the more easy also it is. I was going to bridge the discussion to talk about, so if we've learned what shall be done, what are the organizational structures, designs, communication methods, setups needed in those, needless to say, large organizations that you're working on? What are the necessary things that I need to design to make all that possible? I would like to start to ask Nataly, because we've talked a lot about the setup of the Deutsche Bank Innovation Labs, and you guys are following, let's say, a more regional structure with hubs around the world. So I was going to ask you, why is Deutsche Bank choosing such a setup with those local innovation labs?
Yeah, I think the starting point here is really what our mandate is. And we are here to accelerate the pace of innovation within Deutsche Bank. And we treat our colleagues from Deutsche Bank as our clients or as our main stakeholders, because we help them mainly, which is why the innovation labs, when they were funded, we have at the moment 5 different hubs around the globe. So we have one in London, one in New York, in Germany, Frankfurt, and Berlin, and then we have one covering the APAC region and based in Singapore, basically because that allows us to stay close to the businesses, and where Deutsche Bank has the most important regional impact, really. Because innovation, it is really about bringing in people into a different environment, to think differently, to run workshops, to co-design with clients, to bring them in for user research, interviews or exercises. And I think that's why we needed that physical presence in those locations, basically to be close to our DB officers and colleagues, but subsequently also to the regional clients that we really work for in the end.
And doesn't this impose any like increased complexity in steering, management, and communication, Nataly? How do you keep those local hubs all together?
Yeah, well, I would say it's difficult because also of time zone difference. I mean, we have also regular global calls with all the innovation labs every second week. And you can imagine if you're trying to bring in Palo Alto and Singapore in the same call, then you don't really have that many options. But I think because of the way that we have designed the work and organized how our book of work should look like, meaning our, let's say, innovation labs in Germany, they will focus mainly on the retail banking side of Deutsche Bank. Our colleagues in APAC in Singapore will mainly focus on the wealth management side of Deutsche Bank. Okay. So that really we have some area of focuses in a way, so that really it's kind of very well aligned what everyone is meant to do. And then we have, as I mentioned, really every few weeks some regular calls so that we can all come together and in a way also learn really from each other.
Okay, so it's a little bit of a regional and also functional kind of focus for those innovation labs.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Steve, would it be fair to say that contrary to Deutsche Bank, you're focusing a little bit of a less regional and a little bit more centralized setup to structure your innovation strategy? And if that is true, why did you choose such a setup, and how do you see like pros and cons of more regional, more centralized setups of innovation labs or departments?
I think there's a lot of similarity to what Nataly just talked about. Mm-hmm. I think from our perspective is we do have kind of innovation labs. Like in Singapore, we've got like our blockchain that focuses on blockchain and some of the work we're doing there. Our retail bank kind of closer to home here. In the UK, our security stuff is coming out of Israel. So we look at where the pockets of expertise are and how do we leverage those ecosystems to make sure that we're getting the best from it. But we've set ourselves up more instead of just innovation labs and the people doing it. And I don't know, Nataly, if you guys are set up this way, but we're trying to decentralize or innovation so that it's not a group's responsibility, it's the entire department's responsibility. So our job is to create that foundation to help them through it, but it's their job to execute it and kind of work through it. And I don't want it, and I know this is not what Nataly's doing, but from our side, there have been teams where they have these innovation labs where they get these special badges and they're behind closed doors, and you ask them what they're working on and they don't want to talk about it because it's top secret. We're actually trying to do it very differently, where it's completely open innovation, where we bring in as much collaboration, as much diversity of thought that we can, and also even go a step further through design thinking is bringing in our customers and getting them involved in the innovation agenda versus it just being inwardly looking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense.
Just to add to what you say, Steve, we also always say in the labs, it's not us who innovate, but it's us who really help the bank innovate. And I think we continue always also reinventing ourselves to really identify what does the bank need next to get to the next level and to innovate, really, which is why the strategy of the labs hasn't really been the same for the last 7 years. It has been continuously evolving.
Yeah.
Maarten, how do you see those matters with regards to organizational design? How much is organizational design for you important at Rabobank to make innovation happen?
Yeah, I think it should not be underestimated. I would like to show you a few things that I think works really well at the Rabobank. So first of all, our innovation department is a little bit separate from the business. So that gives a little bit more freedom to maneuver. And I think that's a positive point. We use a single innovation process, which is safeguarded by a single department. our innovation process is the same for our retail business as our business banking business as our wholesale business. So we're all following the same steps. We have an innovation board which comprises of senior managers of the retail business and wholesale banking, and they decide on the portfolio and setting the framework. And I think what also really helps in our example is that unless you reach a certain threshold, you will have a pre-approved budget for the projects that you run. So that will save you a lot of time. Furthermore, our setup is the following: that we use external experts. So that means that we can scale up or scale down pretty fast, and we have resources that are fit for purpose. And finally, what I would really recommend everyone to do is use full-time employees to work on innovation. It's not something, a side project you want to do. You need dedicated people spending 100% of their time on that.
People is a good point, and I know from our pre-discussions that I believe for HSBC that's also a big topic around people. Steve, could you share your view on what role people and upskilling has when you talk about innovation and infusing more innovation in the workforce?
Yeah, I mean, when you come in and you say, all right, we're going to do innovation, it's not like, okay, all of a sudden everybody just kind of turns a switch and they're starting to do innovation. You actually have to give them the environment, the education, the tools, the mentality, the approach to do that. So that's why we're, even leveraging something like Agile and understanding how you have to do things in sprints and feedback loops and different ways of working, driving through that. So to us, the upskilling piece is a key part of it. And we do have a central team that is dedicated to innovation, but I also look to try to leverage those 14,000 people in the crowd to get ideas, to get solutions, because I can never hire them. I don't have the budget to be able to hire those people, but I do have the capability to go out to them, to get their expertise in mind and to participate, to work with me. And so that's kind of how we get it in. And if I can show them value and I can show that I'm focused on their improvements, then that's where they're going to. A lot of people are always thinking, so what? What does this mean for me? What are you going to do for me? And if you can give them the so what or get them involved, they're going to want to participate. If you're not adding value and there isn't a so what for them, it's very difficult to get that mindset and involvement from people. That's my experience.
Yeah, that sounds very reasonable. I've just seen an interesting question from the audience, which I would like to throw at you guys. The question is from Katerina and says, how do you kill the projects that did not bring expected results, but you have already invested so much time and money into it, and the project initiators quite often still try to keep it, which is a typical syndrome involving a lot of biases, throwing bad money after good money. Any thoughts to this?
I'd be happy to give it a try. So our innovation process comprises of 3 different phases, and before we enter a new phase, we set ourselves, we describe the experiments we do, and we also set the criteria of what we believe needs to be. Let's say you interview 30 people, we'll say beforehand, if 10 companies acknowledge that this is a real problem, then we'll say it's validated. And if we don't reach that threshold, which we predefined, then ultimately it doesn't get validated. And so that is in detail how we look at that, and on a higher level. So the stage gates are moments when you want to ask for approval to go to the next stage. These are the moments when we review that, and we do that. We organize ourselves also that if needed, we will bring in external experts to form an opinion on that also. I hope that answers your question, at least from Rabobank's side.
Yes, it does. I think it also answers part of the question that came from Adam just recently. I had one very interesting question personally, but I think also from the audience. So what do you guys think if you think about your focus of attention when it comes to innovation? If we think of the classical McKinsey model, or 3 horizons, Horizon 1, 2, 3, talking about incremental small step innovation, and Horizon 3 being the very much disruptive innovation, new products, new services. how do you divide your attention during these 3 horizons in that crazy environment which we have today, accelerated by a pandemic and so on? And any thoughts to that from Steven or Nataly? Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think that's certainly a model that we have looked into in the past, I must say. I feel like our strategy is now more linked with the overall bank strategy, really, which I think for me seems to be also the best model, because I think that Deutsche Bank has done an amazing job over the last year in really defining what our key priorities are, be it in Horizon 1 or Horizon 2, that we have our, let's say, 8 key priorities that we all know we should be pushing towards. And I think that that's where we as an innovation function come into place. We don't have really like a fully separate innovation strategy that works separate from the bank strategy. And I think that has been a key success factor for it. But we still do a lot of, I think, projects in what I would call the Horizon 3 of McKinsey kind of model, which basically means more getting involved in the 5 to 10 years long-term visionary projects and explorative initiative, because really in the end an innovation function is also there to be like the eyes and the ears of the company to tell you what's happening outside and where should we be paying attention next. And I think that's also our key role in also getting involved in relationships like the World Economic Forum, or really some more regional initiatives that are looking really disruptive trends or technology. So I think a well distribution within all these 3 horizons to be defined is key.
I was also wondering, Steve, because you're also very much attached to academia, I know from our pre-talks and from your activities and what you've been doing. Is a horizon model still relevant for us in banking to measure or structure innovation? Or
I think when you explain innovation, it's a really good tool because it's easy for people to understand. There has been, and there's more dimensions to it than just using. So yes, things have evolved. And I agree with Nataly. I think what we've done is you have to tie it to the group strategy.
Yeah.
Because if you're off doing something else that's not the group strategy, then you're gonna be off there. So you have to kind of figure it out. When I do explain it, I do talk about the Horizon 1, 2, and 3. Only because people find it very easy to understand and see where their projects fall into that and what they do. I feel like it is a good balance, because if I just focus all my efforts into that 36 to 72 month Horizon 3, then people don't see some value in what I'm doing today. So then they start challenging, well, what value are you adding, or what have you done? So I have to kind of combine a little bit of all the different ones. So I have some successes that gives me enough runway to do bigger things, that gives me enough runway to kind of do the bigger disruptive things. So we're very cautious. Innovation, to me, and I would say this because I'm an innovation head, is a must. But some people see it as a luxury. And so for those skeptics, I have to show that we're providing value. And then those incrementals give me the runway to demonstrate that.
Yeah, so you're self-financing, so to say. That's very good to hear. Makes a lot of sense. Maarten, how do you divide your attention at Rabobank between those 3 horizons? Do you focus on a specific one, or?
I think a balanced innovation portfolio should contain all 3. I think 60-30-10 would be a good starting point for internal discussion.
Okay.
On a specific metric. I just want to make a clear distinction that there is a difference between, at least I feel there's a difference between sort of doing a fundamental technical proof of concepts versus an innovation project. In the way we look at it is, even Horizon 3 projects have from the start have a sort of a business model behind it, which then is what we're going to test. So it's in Horizon 3 is not around testing new technologies without having a business model in mind. It is have something a clear business model in mind, and then validating the assumptions.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Interesting. Thanks for sharing also some specific numbers here, Maarten. We are very much in time, ladies and gentlemen, and I would like to take the time to thank you all for your insights, for being with us. I hope you in the audience have enjoyed speaking to our panelists. It has been a pleasure for myself to talk about banking innovation, culture of innovation, organization design matters, how to make it happen, how to fail if you want to win, and also to hear about some of your priorities when it comes to allocating time and resources for the different horizons. The next panel will be, we will jump to the next industry, which will be healthcare. We'll talk about corporate innovation in the healthcare industry. So stay tuned for that. Thank you again, Nataly, Steve, and Maarten, for being with us, and talk soon.
Thank you.